Hi, this is Dennis Downing. I'm going to read you a short story from my latest collection, Epitaphs Written in Blood. The name of the short story is The Voice. My grandfather, Abraham, has been dead for 45 years. He slit his own throat with a razor after suffering in deep depression for more than a year. My mother was the one to find him in the old barn. I didn't hear the story from her. She refuses to talk about it. I heard it from her sister, Dolores. The old photograph had the word Papa written on the back. The man in the photo was sitting in a chair, looking at his hands. He looked so mournful, so distraught. Now, looking at the old photograph, a voice came to me. "Luther," the voice said, "are you happy?" I had never considered whether I was happy or not. I wasn't particularly sad. I said particularly because I was saddened by the look of my grandfather in the photo. I asked again, "Are you happy?" the voice asked. I was married and had 2 children. I loved them very much. Does that make me happy? I guess it does. Then you are happy, the voice said. I guess so, I told the voice. What about your work, Luther? Do you enjoy it? Now that was another can of worms. I had gone to 4 years of college, earning a degree in biology. With that degree, I planned to attend medical school, but my wife, Dawn, had insisted I get a job to support her and the kids. She was right, of course. She had been patient while I was in school. She had lived through the times of hot dogs and food stamps. So I got a job in the Forest Service. Did I like my job? I didn't dislike it, but I wasn't a doctor. Then you don't enjoy your job, the voice said. There was a note of satisfaction in the voice. I didn't hate my job. It had merely robbed me of my dreams. There were good times and bad, and I suppose the good times were a greater part of the equation. What about your mother and father? The voice asked. My father had done his best raising me, but his best fell a great deal short from a good job. To me, he had seemed mean and unloving. I wasn't happy with the memories he had left me. My mother had been the loving one of the family. I knew she loved me and my sister. She was now having problems, however. She had developed depression. Was it hereditary? Some said that it was. As for my sister Linda, she had always been happy and loving. We had had great relationship while growing up. I always felt loved by her, but she was beginning to show signs of depression as well. Again I ask, is it hereditary? I think it is, Luther, the voice told me. What is? I asked. Hereditary, you fool. I hadn't been called a fool since my father had died. Being called that released a flood of emotions, like pus flowing from a lanced boil. I felt young and self-loathing. The self-loathing had come from my father's words. They had been venomous and omnipotent. Don't call me a fool, I told the voice with the conviction of a marshmallow. You don't have the brains to pour piss out of a boot, the voice said. Again, it was a chord of doubt and degradation. My father had said those very words to me. Why, you ask? Because he disliked me. He thought of me as inferior, and that made him inferior, like father, like son. Now I ask you again, the voice said. Luther, are you happy? He had taken a small piece of me, like a rat nibbling at a bit of cheese. The thought of the past insecurities voided my feelings of self-worth. The following week, I was a lesser person. At a meeting during the week, I was indecisive. Gina, my boss, called me on it. Why don't you stick up for our plan as we had agreed, she asked me. Because I don't have the brains to pour piss out of a boot, I wanted to say. At dinner one night, Jeremy asked me if he could spend the night at his friend's home over the weekend. I had blown up, telling him that he couldn't spend the night until he did better in school. He's doing just fine in school, Don had told me. He's fine when I said he's fine, I shouted at her. I can't remember a time when I had ever done that. Was this me? What was coming over me? I thought of my grandfather. My mother had found him dead in the barn. He had slit his own throat with a razor. Luther, the voice came to me. Where is my photo? I went to my shoebox of photos. His photo was the first one in the box. I took it out. He looked so sad, so melancholy, so sorrowful. Why had he slit his throat? I decided to call my mother. Hello, Luther, she said when she picked up the phone. How did you know it was me? I asked. Why, your number appeared on my TV, of course, she told me. Duh, I thought to myself. You don't have the brains to pour piss out of a boot, my father had said. What were these discussions with my grandfather? And what were they doing to me? Why did my grandfather kill himself? I asked her. He had the family depression, she told me. Why do you call it that? I queried. He wasn't the only one in the family to commit suicide, she said. Who else was there? This was the first time I had heard of others. His brother, Lawrence, also killed himself. And he had the depression, I asked. I didn't know. Depression runs in the family like cold water from the tap, she told me. Just talking to her made me feel afraid. If it can happen to them, it can happen to me. My mother had been hospitalized for depression 3 times, knock on wood. I had never been hospitalized in my life. Hopefully I never will be. I thought of the photo of my grandfather. So sad. So very, very sad. Have you thought about suicide? I asked my mother. You don't want to know, she answered. I do want to know, I told her. It's important to me. It wasn't important enough for you to visit me in the hospital 8 months ago, she said. Her words were like a knife in my heart. I hadn't been there for her. I hadn't called. I hadn't visited. I had been too busy with my own life. I'm sorry I didn't visit you, I told her. Truth be told, she said, I didn't want you to see me like that. Like what? I asked. I had horrible bruises on my neck. I had tried to hang myself, she admitted for the very first time. Why? I asked. My father told me to do it, she told me. But your father is dead, I said. Then I thought of the photo. It was in my hand. This is why I had called her. I thought I was the one that caused my father to slit his throat, she told me. I was the fifth child in the family. It was my fault we didn't have enough money to eat. It was my fault my father was going to have to sell the farm. Who told you it was your fault? I asked her. I told you, my father, she told me. Have you been looking at the family photos? I have the photo of Grandpa right here as we speak, I told her. Is it the photo of him in the chair? She asked me. Yes, he looks so very sad. I think you should get rid of that photo, she told me. I looked down at the photo. I couldn't get rid of it. It was the only picture I had of my grandfather. I wasn't going to throw it away. Don't listen to her, the voice told me. And for heaven's sake, don't tell her that you have been looking at the photo. Don't tell her of your feelings. Those are just between you and me. I am the only one that can help you with them. Luther, are you still there? Yeah, Mom, I'm still here. You're not thinking bad thoughts, are you? I just wish I visited you in the hospital, that's all. Don't worry about that, Luther. That's spilt milk that's long since been mopped up. I asked her if she would call me if she ever felt like that again. She said she would try, but she didn't promise me. I asked her why not, and I will never forget what she told me. She said that depression was deeply personal. She also said that people didn't understand. I don't think she trusted me to care. After all, where had I been the 3 times she was hospitalized? I wondered if anyone would care about me if I was alone and depressed and afraid. Probably not. I heard from my grandfather many times that summer. My self-esteem was at an all-time low. In the fall, I began ruminating about that photo. I had begun to carry it with me everywhere. You don't have the brains to pour piss out of a boot, he reminded me. Why did you have to kill yourself? I asked him. It was in my blood, he told me. I was born with the curse. Depression, I asked him. That and suicide, Luther. They go hand in hand. I've begun to think about killing myself. Maybe it's the weather. It has been cold and foggy since September. The fog puts a damper on my life. I can feel it smothering the life out of me. Do I have depression? I wonder. With the fog and the cold, everyone feels a little blue. Is that normal? I think it is. There are times when I put the photo in my lap and stare at it. You're not happy, son, are you? The voice asks me. I don't know, I answer. Maybe it's time, he tells me. Maybe it's time. I'm a wuss. I'm afraid of pain. I could never slit my throat. I have a bottle of painkillers, though. They're pretty heavy duty. The doctor gave them to me before and after I had back surgery. I had become addicted, so I forced myself to quit. There must be 30 or 40 capsules in the bottle. I read on the internet that painkillers and alcohol are a surefire way to off yourself. Maybe it's time, he tells me. Maybe it's time. Now I have counted them. There are 43 capsules. Oxycodone, the name says on the bottle. I remember taking just one when my back was bad. It knocked me on my ass. Do you know how to make a martini? I think it's gin and vermouth. I bought both of them this morning. I even bought green olives. Dawn is at work and the kids are at school. I'm alone. Maybe it's time, he tells me. Maybe it's time. I just swallowed 5 with a swig from my double martini. I swallowed 5 more. It's becoming easier. Now 10 with a big swallow of gin from the bottle. I'm feeling dizzy. If you don't down them all, you might wake up in the morning with a hell of a headache and an angry wife, I tell myself. 10 more. I can hardly keep my eyes open. Keep going, my grandfather tells me from his photo on my lap. 10 more. So dizzy. Can't sit up. 13 to go. At least I think it's 13. They're in my mouth. Bots, I think to myself. Where did that thought come from? Parasitology in college. They are capsule-shaped larvae in the stomach of a horse. Bots. With 2 gulps, I wash them down. You don't have brains to pour piss out of a